What's up, everybody? Thanks for listening to the Whatcast. Mike, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. Weather's starting to get nice. The plants are starting to grow. We actually just planted some stuff this weekend, so things are looking up.
Nice. It's been weird over here.
Yeah.
It hasn't gotten past 60 for like 2 weeks. Then it got to 85 for 3 days, and now it won't stop raining.
We did have some rain this weekend. It was kind of, it was a mild weekend. It was like in the 40s, but I just found a fucking toad on my sidewalk earlier this evening.
Sick.
And, yeah, it was so fucking cold. It's like 40 degrees out right now, and it's just sitting there. So I scooped it up and put it in my flower bed so it can at least bury itself under the mulch if it needs to. But it was a big fat guy. I don't know what the hell he's been eating. It's been cold as shit, but it was cool. The first one I've seen this year. It was awesome.
And he just let you grab him, and he didn't trip out, or did he do that creepy frog scream?
No, I just scooped him right up, and he was cool. I think it was because he was cold, so he wasn't really all that feisty. He's like, oh, your hands are so warm.
Well, everyone, they found some weird shit under the pyramids, and you bet your bippy we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, they found the secret tomb of Nyarlathotep, and the old ones are returning.
It almost seems that way. We waited a little while to cover this to see what information came out. And there's been some updates about the size of these things that have been found under the pyramids, the Giza pyramids. And you may have heard that. And the person reporting this, Mike finally found out. It's a gentleman by the name of Filippo Biondi. And he's got a PhD in Doppler tomography and underground imaging with this special new radar. What do they call it? Pulse radar, right?
It's, I don't know exactly what the hell it is. It's called the SAR, but it's a synthetic aperture radar. I don't really know the science behind it.
Me neither. I tried. I don't know.
That's the deal.
Yeah, so we'll call it the new magic radar. But they've used this radar on the pyramids and found these structures. And again, there's new numbers. The study that he did using this radar has detected 8 vertical cylindrical pillars extending over 2,100 feet under the pyramid, with an additional unknown structures that look to be like big rectangular rooms connected to some of these big cylinders that reach down another 4,000 feet. So this huge structure altogether goes down over 6,500 fucking feet.
Yeah, that's crazy. If it's true, I shouldn't say if it's true. If it's accurate, that's crazy. And the one thing I do want to put out there, because this was something that was new I say new. It was something that was getting a lot of attention recently, so a lot of people thought it was a new discovery. But this paper was written in 2022, and as of yet, it has not been peer-reviewed. So I think that's important to note. It was not something that has been peer-reviewed yet. So while this guy's got legitimate credentials and he's putting this out there, I think it is important to note that it's not peer-reviewed. But for the conspiracy-minded among us, we can always say that things that challenge establishment, really in any case, but a lot of the time establishment science or what's established as being accurate history, things that alter that. There's a lot of people that say that gets covered up because it fucks with the status quo, and it a lot of it I think has to do with ego. But you could go that route, I suppose, and say, well, the reason it's not peer reviewed is because no one wants to get in on that, and they're all in on the cover up. Or you could also look at it as being people in academic circles are hesitant to put their reputation on the line. So by giving some ridiculous claim credence, even though there might be accuracy or something to these findings, because it's such a ridiculous claim to make, people are going to be hesitant to even sign off on it. or review it for accuracy and to make sure it's something real. But if it is real, like I would have to assume at this point most of you have seen the computer imaging of what was supposed to have been found. And if that's true, what was the purpose?
Right. Yeah, that's well, I mean, before we get into that, I wanted to kind of touch on something. There was a dude, and I always forget his name. I apologize, but I'm an asshole. He was the head of antiquities, and he didn't let anybody fucking investigate anything over there for years. What was his name?
Zahi Hawass.
Right. So can you kind of go into that a little bit? Like, what's the controversy with him? Was he stopping people from studying all the pyramids and stuff?
Well, there's a lot with him. I mean, he lost his title due to I guess he was some corruption with the government, I guess. So they stripped him of his title with the old government, like he was taking government payouts or something. I don't really know the exact details behind it. But again, he was, I know at one point he was debating Graham Hancock about the age of the Sphinx, because Graham Hancock is pushing the idea that it's considerably older than what modern historians are saying. And so, and he ended up getting all fired up about that. He really is, I feel like he hates the ancient aliens stuff so much. And the people that think that the Egyptian monuments were older than they are, that pisses him off too. And I don't know if it's his ego or if he's just like fed up with it. I don't know what his deal is, but he hates that topic so much. And he is adamant that what modern history states is the actual truth.
Okay, yeah, I was kind of surprised to hear that there was a new study done on like scanning the fucking pyramids, because I always heard that guy didn't let people, or just caused a lot of problems. And you brought up Graham Hancock, and we'll get into that a little bit later about what he says about the Sphinx, because I have a question for you about that. That we'll get to that, but you mentioning this study being that old, I didn't know that. It seems like this is just another fucking TikTok reel that went wild and everybody shat their pants about, because it's from 2022.
Yeah, it was one of those things. It got brought up in a press conference, I believe, and it was brought up by one of the reporters from InfoWars. So, I guess that says everything you need to know about his credentials, but he brought it up, and I think because he brought that up recently, that is kind of what made this all come up again. Because, I mean, let's be real. All this stuff it makes for good TikTok videos. It's you can make a minute-long video talking, oh my God, this was just recently found. You show the images and blah, blah, blah. And very little info. You just kind of throw it out there. But all these people aren't reading academic papers. So not a lot of people would have actually read this back in 2022. But because it was just recently talked about at a press conference, people grabbed that, and then it's, just easy content to make. So it made the rounds on the internet just like everything does. And then after it made its rounds, it just goes quiet. And that's that. We probably won't hear about it again. It probably won't be peer reviewed in 10 years. And maybe someone on some conspiracy podcast 10 years from now will bring this up and be like, did you know in 2022 there was a study that was done analyzing underground and they found this? And they'll be talking about it then, and then it'll bubble back up again in 2020. It'll be like the fucking face on Mars all over again.
Right. Yeah, good point. It's interesting. They're calling it a huge underground city. It's changing, and that's why I wanted to wait. I got from this article I found from Egypt Independent. I'll put it in the show notes. It's got a lot of good information on it. And I kind of wanted to hear what the people of Egypt and the experts over there were saying about this, because it is tremendous. It is crazy. Archaeological researcher at the University of Denver, Lawrence Conyers, was said in an interview that this is a huge exaggeration. and former Egyptian Minister of Antiquities. Pardon me for destroying the pronunciation. I'm bad at it. You guys know. Mr. Mado Al-Damati called the claims utterly baseless. So it's not just peer-reviewed. And they mentioned that it's not peer-reviewed. Egyptologist and former Director General of the Giza Pyramids area, Mr. Hussein Abdel Bazar, says, this study lacks the most basic standards of proper scientific research. It seems to be something blown out of proportion. Now, you had said that this is not peer-reviewed. The fact that it's from 2022 and it's yet to be peer-reviewed is interesting to me. Why do you think they're not reviewing this if this is true?
I think whether it's true or not, I don't think it'll be peer-reviewed because people don't want to get their hands on the mess. Like, think about going back to that little mummy from Stephen Greer. And there was one dude who was willing to do it. And people talk so much shit about that dude just for trying to do it. You know, just because he was willing to test this thing. Because it was such a ridiculous claim that was being made. They're like, you call yourself a scientist because you're... But, I mean, I think that's like the very nature of scientific thought. You know, like, be willing to take the chance on the ridiculous for the smallest percentage that it might be real. And then you are now tied with history at this point because you are the one who is doing the study on it. But I don't think a lot of people want to do that because if not true, then it could impact their own reputation. Like, oh, this is the guy who was willing to review the claims that there's thousands of feet of chambers underneath the Great Pyramid. So I don't think whether it's real or not, people are even going to give it a look.
That's crazy and so unfortunate. I mean, like, I know it was InfoWars, but they knew about it. And this is incredible to me. I got to ask you, like, besides, like, what is it? What was your first impression when you saw these computer generated images of what's supposedly down there?
Well, like with all things, I just thought it was too good to be true. Whenever I see something that's so fucking cool, I'm always like, no, there's no way. It's way too cool to be real. And usually I'm right. This, I don't know. I don't know what they could possibly be. You know, the images make it look like they're pillars, but are they pillars? Are they hollow? Is it maybe not pillars? Maybe they're something else altogether. Maybe buildings, maybe chambers. What is it? What is it? And what purpose does it serve?
Right, and we'll get into some of the theories about what it could be, what the pyramids are in general. But one thing that I thought of when I first saw this was Graham Hancock. When you're talking about the pyramids, there's, of course, always been debate if people can actually fucking do that shit. I don't think people understand the power of slave labor and the amount of people that were working on this thing. There's been plenty of technologies that have been lost to humanity. An easy example is, what is it, like the Roman aquatic concrete? Like they made a concrete that can set in water, and that wasn't rediscovered for thousands of years. So I think when I saw this, I was like, okay, let's just say that men built the pyramids. We can go through how. There's a couple theories that we can touch on, but there's one in particular that I saw a while back, to where they were kind of building a wall around the base of the pyramid and then filling it with water and basically barging stones and building it, as long as they built, and then just disassembled this after they were done. And that kind of made me think of Graham Hancock's water level theory, the water markings on the Sphinx. I can believe that man made the pyramids. I don't believe that man can build 6,000 feet down in the fucking desert. I think it's absolutely bizarre. Those pillars have spirals around them. I instantly thought about those spirals being some type of ventilation, or the columns being ventilation, and those spirals maybe being a staircase down there. to those big, huge rectangle rooms that it looks, that apparently are 4,000 feet. 4,000 feet tall rooms? That's gigantic.
So they would have had to dig a hole out of the ground 4,000 feet and then build this, and then it would have had to have been covered up, and then the pyramid would have been built on top of it. But I mean, there's evidence in Greek architecture of large of like temples and things like that being built on the sites of places that already existed, and it's got different architecture and everything. But this is something else Graham Hancock talks about, where the architecture is completely different, where the ancient Romans or the Greeks had smaller blocks. They're built on these foundations that have these giant, huge blocks that don't match up with the way that they would have built foundations at the time. But the foundation for these temples were built on top of these big rocks that were already there. And I say rocks, they were obviously something that was quarried and shaped and everything and put into place. But it was something that already existed there when they decided to build their temple.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? Like if you find an area, and then that's the best place to build. It looks like it can hold weight and be a good foundation to build a structure like that. And I was just listening to something, and shame on me for not remembering, but it was a story of somebody's journal from the time of the pyramids, and they remember traveling somewhere, and I think it was before the pyramids, and they were attacked by bandits, and they ended up ditching everything and running into like this structure nearby, and they in their journals they noted that there's already ancient structures there, just ancient, and like if this is to be man-made, we can't fathom the time it took to make the pyramids. Like it's insane. Imagine, we got to add the time it took to build this, all this shit underneath. Now, is that possible?
I think if anything, it would, if it's real, let's start there. If it's real, I think it would indicate that there is an older civilization that predates the ancient Egyptians, and that they're likely started the process for whatever these are, and then it was finished and capped off with the pyramids. That's my thought. If it's real, again, if it's real,
it's just incredible. That's why I thought of Graham Hancock and the water line on the Sphinx. Do you think that? I mean, the area must have been underwater at some point in time. Do you think that water was used to move sand to get that deep? Is that a possibility?
Well, it wasn't actually underwater. It was just like around, I think it was 12,500 years ago, when the alternative theory of when the Sphinx was built. During that period of time, there was pretty significant rainfall in the area, so it would have been more like a rather than a desert, it probably would have been more like a rainforest sort of situation, or like a tropical area.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been very, very different landscape at that point in time. So I know the theory that the pyramids are power plants, that involved utilizing water, which I would assume would be drawn from the Nile. We know water can be used for all sorts of things. We've even got fucking those blasters, like the blasters, the pressure washers, where you use fucking high pressure water to strip paint off things. Like you could do a lot of shit with water.
Yeah,
you can make shit float. You dig a hole underneath it, fill it with water, and the debris from the bottom will float up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been a long time theory, that the pyramids were power plants. Can you tell me about that? Because you sent me a picture earlier that was very, very interesting. I wonder if it was hypothesis or what.
Yeah, well, all right. So with the pyramids, there's a few different things related to pyramid power. There's the power plant theory, which some would argue is utterly ridiculous, but out of the pyramid power things, I think that's the more plausible. The other idea of pyramid power is that the structure of the pyramid is what creates the power. There was a guy in 1930 named Antoine Bovis, and he was a French ironmonger, and he wrote extensively about dowsing. Are you familiar with dowsing?
Yes, sir.
All right. So for anyone that isn't, you might remember from old cartoons, they would find, like, if somebody was lost in the woods or whatever, or in the desert, they would find a Y-shaped stick and it would guide them to water. That's essentially the idea of dowsing, or he would write extensively about dowsing. But he also wrote about pyramids and the structure of the pyramids. And he had a theory that pyramids would be able to work in preservation. So like preserving food or preserving plant matter or corpses. The story around this, the story is kind of weird because there's a legend around how he came to this theory, but this legend itself is completely debunked by Bovis. So the legend is that Bovis visited Egypt and went into the Great Pyramid, and he was going on the tour there, and he went into the king's chamber. And in the king's chamber, apparently at this time, I would highly doubt if it's still a thing, but at the time, apparently there was a garbage can that they would keep inside the king's chamber to dispose of any animals that wandered into the pyramid and ended up dying there. And then they would throw them in this can. And apparently, according to legend, he deduced that the carcasses were not decaying in a normal manner, and based on that determined that the structure of the pyramid was somehow responsible for preserving them. But like I said, there's the discrepancy in Bovis's own writings. He stated he had never been to Egypt, but he made this hypothesis after he himself had conducted experiments using a dowsing pendulum. But I've got an excerpt where he talks about it from one of his writings. And he says, "I have supposed that Egyptians were already very good dowsers and had oriented their pyramid by means of rod and pendulum. Being unable to go there to experiment and verify the radiations of the pyramid, I have built with cardboard some pyramids that you can see now. And I was astonished when, having built a regular pyramid and oriented it, I found the positive at the east, the negative at the west, and at the north and south, dual positive and dual negative. Since with the help of our positive 2,000-degree magnet plates, we can mummify small animals, could the pyramid have the same property? I tried, as you can observe, with the small fish and a little piece of meat still hanging. I succeed totally." So he's claiming that he did this experiment in a cardboard pyramid and that it was effective. Going along with that kind of, I guess he was inspired a bit. There was a Czechoslovakian man in 1949 named Karel Durbel, and he actually filed for a patent on an item that he dubbed the Pharaoh's shaving device. And what this was essentially a model pyramid that was supposed to keep the edges on razors sharp longer. And the way it was supposed to work was you would place the razor inside the magnetic field within the pyramid so that the sharp edge of the pyramid would line up with the direction of the magnetic lines. And I believe you had to have it set up so it was going north-south. The edge of the blade would be going north-south. And the shape of the pyramid was supposed to focus Earth's magnetic field, but Durbel couldn't go into detail on why this actually worked. And whether he could not or he would not, I don't know, but there was actually precedence for his claim going back to 1933. And there was a letter that someone had written into the Times, and the Times actually published. And in the letter, this person wrote that he had figured out a way to keep the edge of razors sharper longer. And what you would do is you would get out your compass at home, and you would line up the north-south position on the compass, and you would line up your razors in concert with that north-south line. And if you did that, the edge of your razor would last considerably longer. And the guy who wrote in on this said that he found out about this. Someone told him about this at the turn of the century in 1900. So there's no, I mean, that's about as far back as these claims go, I guess. So I don't know if this guy was making it up or if it was like a wives' tale sort of thing that he took to heart and just kind of assumes that that's the way it goes. But Eric von Daniken also referenced the preservative power of pyramids by claiming that mummies had been preserved by some unknown scientific process in Egypt. The thing is, with a lot of these theories, whether it be ancient aliens or the power plant theory, the idea is that the pyramids were not tombs. They were used for another purpose. And the fact that there's never been any bodies found there or any treasure or anything would seem to indicate that maybe burial was not the reason for this.
Mm-hmm.
But as you can imagine, it's pretty easy to debunk these claims. There was experiments in the 70s. It was written about in a book by Terrence Hines called Pseudoscience and the Paranormal. And he wrote about these experiments that were done in the 70s where they were trying to preserve meat or plant matter using the structure of a pyramid. And they would take the same thing and put it in other shaped containers. And what they found was that there was no difference. It rotted at the exact same time. Then they tried the razor technique. Also didn't work. There was even an episode of Mythbusters that was devoted to these claims. It aired in 2005. And they were able to prove that all of these claims were false. The shape of the pyramid did not preserve anything, did not sharpen your razors or keep them sharper longer. It's all a load of bullshit, as you can imagine.
Wah, wah, wah.
But oddly enough, there was a hockey team, may have been the Toronto Maple Leafs, but they were losing. They had just lost their last 2 home games, and they were going into a series. They were in a series of 7, and they ended up, after losing their first 2 games in the series, they set up a pyramid in the locker room, and every player before the game would stand under this pyramid for 4 minutes, and they ended up winning the next 3 games, but then they ended up losing the series in the end. So maybe it was just coincidence, but you know, sometimes that placebo effect works, though. You convince people that it's going to work, and it does work because they believe it's going to work.
Right. And that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I feel like this stuff is more like new agey type stuff, like, you know, the crystal butt plug sort of thing. But the idea that the pyramid was actually a power plant is there's a little bit of evidence that might support that. I don't want to go so far as to say like that it's definitive evidence, but there is some evidence here. So some people that listen to Joe Rogan might recognize the name Christopher Dunn. I don't know. I know that he was on last year. I don't know if he had been on before that or not. I don't really listen to Joe Rogan, but I did know about this one. But he's a retired aerospace engineer, and he spent years analyzing the pyramid, doing a lot of research. He actually wrote the book Giza Power Plant, where it's a book solely devoted to his studies on the Great Pyramid and why he thinks this was part of a power plant. But he was talking about, when he went on Joe Rogan, he was talking about some of the, I guess, engineering behind it, or what it would take to, how they were able to do this. And he was talking about the northern shaft of the pyramid, which he said has an appearance similar to a tube-like structure, which would be used to transmit microwaves and electromagnetic energy. And what they would do is they would mix two chemicals, and two chemicals would get introduced into the queen's chamber, and they would boil off the hydrogen. And the queen's chamber was used as like a reaction chamber where the hydrogen was produced, and then hydrogen would fill the interior spaces of the Great Pyramid and flow into the king's chamber. So basically what he's theorizing is that they would have used these two separate chemicals, poured them into the shafts, down the shafts into the queen's chamber, which would mix there, boil off hydrogen particles, and then it would trigger the energy that would then be used to, I guess, get broadcast through the pyramid, for lack of a better term, or emitted through the pyramid. But there was a study done in 2018. A group of researchers from ITMO University in Russia was doing the study. And the ITMO University, it stands for Information Technologies, Mechanics, and Optics. So they're a renowned technical school, but it's a state-supported university. So it'd be like a public university here, not a private institution. But they were conducting research there, and they were conducting experiments on a model based on the Great Pyramids. And the focus was the response of the pyramid to waves within wavelengths between 656 and 1,968 feet, which is a range commonly associated with radio frequencies. So they built these model pyramids and set it up as if it was like this environment. Basically, they were treating it like an environment. So what they were trying to do was make it so that they could like block out any external factors. They wanted to be able to completely control everything in there. So they were trying to keep it away from anything within Earth's atmosphere, trying to rule out the surrounding landscape, and keeping everything as I guess close to being in its own bubble as possible. But then in doing this, they were looking to examine how the pyramid interacted with incoming waves. So they were doing electromagnetic experiments they were trying to make it as realistic conditions as possible. So they built this pyramid on top of a limestone surface, because at the location in Giza where the pyramids are, they actually do have a limestone base to them. So after they were done conducting these experiments, they revealed that the internal structure of the pyramid, including the three chambers, was able to gather and focus electromagnetic energy that was received from the waves that they were emitting. So in their theoretical models, again, this was all structures they built. It wasn't the actual pyramid. They were just trying to replicate the inside of the pyramid. But on their theoretical models, when the waves at specific frequencies interacted with the pyramid, they excited what they called multipole resonances. And they showed specifically that the king's chamber, which is located near the center of the Great Pyramid, seemed to concentrate electromagnetic energy more effectively than any of the other chambers did.
Bizarre.
Yeah. And but again, this wasn't in these experiments were not conducted in the actual pyramid. It was a model that they had fabricated. So, you can make of that what you will, but this is a state-sponsored technical college, so I don't think that they'd be, fucking around and doing some shady bullshit. But I mean, who knows? It's a state-sponsored Russian school, so I guess make of that what you will. You can draw your own conclusions or opinions based on that alone, I suppose.
It's kind of like a pyramid. I mean, it's like a triangle above ground.
Yeah, I think it was just a flat triangle that we drew on the floor, and that's we drew a little square, and that's the king's chamber. And no, there's they've got diagrams showing where they were testing the electromagnetic waves, and you can see how the king's chamber seemed to resonate the highest. But it also seemed to indicate that the limestone base had a purpose for directing the energy. Kind of like it was like think of the shape of the pyramid. So it'd be like, that would be like where the energy would start to build, and then it would get channeled up through the point, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I've mentioned it before on the show about Nikola Tesla and how he had to design for a perpetual energy machine that looks very similar to the cross-section of the Great Pyramid.
Really?
Complete with underground chambers that would house water and chambers for filling in, or for the gas to build up and produce the energy. Yeah, it's not exactly, but it's very, very close to what the cross-section of the pyramid looks like. So that picture that I sent you, that it looks very similar to that.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. So these things under the pyramids could be the what is it, 4,000 feet rectangle rooms are chambers for water.
Maybe. Or maybe that's something that would help to harness the energy or store the energy, maybe. Or maybe they had a way to transmit the energy underground rather than through the air.
Right.
Tesla always talked about how you'd be able to send energy through the air. And that was part of that was the science, or the reason behind the perpetual energy machine that he was trying to create. But he believed that the pyramids themselves held secrets that were related to Wow, I cannot talk. He believed that the pyramids themselves held secrets related to electromagnetism. He also thought that they had the ability to store energy and potentially even had the universal code, or what he referred to as the mathematical language, and that they may have been designed to harness and utilize energy from celestial bodies.
Whoa.
But he seemed to really be into the idea of the potential that the pyramids had for storing and moving electricity or energy. And he was thinking that they could have been used to power the areas around them. And part of Dunn's book actually shows that this could have been a network along the Nile. There's a lot of pyramids that seem to be situated within proximity to the Nile, that kind of go in like, it almost looks like it would be a network if they were, think of them like power plants that we have today that are connected with our power lines. Like, that's how these would be, except without the power lines. These would be all the pyramids along the way here would be the power hub that would give energy for the area.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And I mean, if that's true, then Tesla was able to figure that out independently of anything that because anything that the Egyptians would have had about it would have been in the Library of Alexandria when it was burned down. So we wouldn't have any record of that, but he was able to kind of look at it and figure out what it was. And like I said, his plans for the perpetual energy machine very closely mimic the cross-section of the pyramid.
What do you think about that when you hear about the burning of the Library of Alexandria? I mean, I kind of, in my mind, when you think about it in relation to the pyramids, like maybe they were just some type of insane weapon, and they were just like, just destroy any writings of it or how to replicate it. Like it'll take 200 years to build this. We're not going to rebuild this. but make it render it unusable and destroy all evidence that could detail anything about how this fucking thing works. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, I've heard it said that the burning of Alexandria set science and mathematics back like 1,000 years. So
Wow.
like we would be far more advanced now if we were able to keep those records. Because a lot of, without having those records anymore, a lot of civilization had to relearn a lot of that stuff.
Just devastating. Just insane.
Or find different ways to do it when instead we could have been improving on things all along.
Just insane. Devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. But the as to why the pyramids, why whatever happened with the pyramids to make them stop working, or why they're no longer in working order or producing energy or whatever. Chris Dunn actually talks about it in one of his books, and he believes that there was a huge explosion inside the pyramid, which he thinks was likely the result of an earthquake-induced power surge. So an earthquake happened, producing a spike in the power, and then the hydrogen, when that exploded, it was too much and it fucked everything up. But in a book that was written about the pyramids and temples of Giza, there was an author that had written that there was inside the king's chamber, there was a force that he was able to detect, that the walls in the chamber had been pushed out by over an inch from their original position.
Ooh.
So it would have taken a powerful force to do that, because it was all the walls in the chamber.
Is that something that can happen gradually over time, or was it a forceful event?
The king's chamber is the only chamber to display this sort of
wow,
adjustment. Yeah.
Okay.
There are also some cracks in the ceiling beams that the explanation for them from a historical standpoint is that it was damage from an earthquake. But again, there's no similar damage in any of the lower parts of the pyramid. So you'd think if it was due to an earthquake from below, that the tremors would have went upwards and created cracks in the lower levels rather than going up and then just cracking this one area. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Wow.
There was, at one point, Dunn went to, he had originally gone to Egypt, went through the pyramid and everything, and was developing this theory, but he went back in 1999, and in 99, the pyramid had been thoroughly cleaned. So what he originally thought was limestone in the Grand Gallery was actually highly polished granite, which would have made sense if this was supposed to be a chamber where hydrogen was being produced. They would need something that would be able to sustain heavy heat. He was also able to see that there were actual scorch marks over a particular area where the hydrogen would have been converted, which would have produced flames or smaller explosions. And there were burn marks all along the ceiling in this area that lined up perfectly with where the vent would have been to release the fire or the heat. So there's some, like if the damage was done by an earthquake, why are there scorch marks?
Right.
What caused the scorch marks? And there's not an explanation for that.
Mm-hmm. That's weird. It seems like there's a lot more evidence for these things being not just big structures. I mean, like when you were a kid, what did you think about the pyramids? For me, when I saw them, they're not just a monument. Like, that's insane they're just like, we're just going to build a big triangle for fun. To me, it clearly has to have a purpose, a function.
Yeah, and it would make sense. And I know a lot of modern historians, if you start saying they're not burial structures, you're like, oh, you're a fucking idiot. But honestly, they talk about how there's no bodies, and then they say that it was looted, and that's clearly an explanation for why there's no bodies, but there's no hieroglyphs. There's nothing indicating who was there. No treasure at all. And again, if there were robbers, they would have stolen the treasure, but there's nothing. There's no decoration. Everything seems very utilitarian in there. Like it wasn't there for its aesthetic purposes. It was there to serve a function.
Wow.
And then you've got the weird things like Gattenbrink's door that they opened a few years ago, and it's this little tiny narrow passage that goes through the pyramid that has a little door in it, but it's so small that they had to use a remote controlled car with a drill on it to drill a hole through the door and then slide a little camera through so that they could see what was on the other side.
What was on the other side?
Another fucking door. I remember they were doing a live broadcast of it on National Geographic Channel, and I was so pumped because I had just read this book called The Stargate Conspiracy, and they were talking about the Great Pyramid and Gattenbrink's door. So I was like all amped about it. I'm like, fuck yeah, let's see what's behind it. And they get in there, and it's another fucking door on the other side.
I remember this. That's crazy, dude. What if whoever helped them build pyramids, or it is built by aliens, or with the assistance of multi-dimensional all-knowing beings, that there's just a door that they've been waiting for us to open for thousands and thousands of years, that'll signal them to save humanity, and they just fucking all died off by now, man.
Yeah, it sucks that we'll never know. No matter what, like, we're at the end of the day, the only thing we're going to know is what is in the history books, what's being written about it by modern academics and historians. And that's the truth, because that's as best as we know. You can have all these theories, but there's really no way to know for sure, unless these fucking 4,000 foot things under the pyramid are discovered as being real. We go down there and we're like, oh shit. And then we find the secret passage underneath the Sphinx that has all the good shit that was smuggled out of the Library of Alexandria. And then again, we're like, oh shit. And then we start having all these fucking Egyptian wizards out there, and they start raising the dead and casting lightning down and summoning the great old ones. And then we're all fucked.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week.